All right, it is 1:30. I am got a lot to cover, so I am going to just jump in and start going. I am Jesse Barnum. I'm the president of 360Works. I'm going to be talking about MirrorSync 7 today. This is a presentation. This is not the first time I've done this presentation, so if you guys are all like, hey, I just was on a user group meeting or something, saw this presentation, I won't be bothered if you guys are like, oh, I've seen this before. I'm hoping that this will be a little different than the previous presentations because it's always a lot of fun when I get questions and feedback. And I'll have time for some questions at the end, but please don't wait till the end to ask questions. If you guys have questions, yell them out. We've got a microphone, or if we don't get to the microphone, I'll just repeat it. If somebody can help me remind me to repeat the question, or with the microphone, either way. It's just more fun if everybody's talking and asking questions and giving me a hard time than if it's just me talking the entire time. So just a little bit about me. I started 360Works in 1996. I'm the developer of a lot of our products. MirrorSync is the one I spend my most time with, but I also work on SafetyNet and Zulu. I've spoken a lot at DevCon, user group meetings. I was here in EngageU in 2019, I think, in Stockholm. 2021, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Johan, for inviting me to speak here. This is my wife, Lisa, is in the back. Wave, Lisa. This is our first time in Belgium, and it's been a really nice trip, so we're having a really great time. It's really fun being here. Some things, just a little bit about me. I love Dungeons and Dragons, although I didn't put it on my slide. I love camping. I love riding motorcycles, but my favorite thing is camping while riding motorcycles. So who here has not used MirrorSync before? Great, okay. So that helps me figure out what to spend time on, what to skip over. So I will definitely spend a little bit of time talking about what MirrorSync is and what it does. A lot of my content is based on what's new and better about MirrorSync 7 than 6, but I'll make sure not to just skip the basics in terms of like, here's what MirrorSync is for. So MirrorSync basically operates in two main modes. There's server-to-server syncs. There we go, that's better. There's server-to-server syncs, and there are client-to-server syncs. For the server-to-server syncs, we sync with, and I'm going to do some demos that'll highlight this in a little bit, but we sync with a bunch of different servers. I think most people who have used MirrorSync before, not everybody, but most people who have used MirrorSync before are probably most familiar with syncing FileMaker Server to FileMaker Pro Client. That's this bottom one right here. And that's a really common case. You've got a FileMaker Go application. You want to give it to users. They're going to be going into the desert, or they're going to be doing inspection in people's homes. I talked to somebody yesterday who says we've got some clients in Ukraine, and they're going to be doing surveillance, and there's not going to be a cell tower nearby. So there's some neat stuff that people are doing with it. But anytime that you need to work with a connection that is either slow, unreliable, or non-existent, MirrorSync lets you take a copy of your FileMaker hosted file on your server and put it on an iPad, an iPhone, or a laptop running FileMaker Pro or Go. Take that copy with you. Much, much, much faster to work on that system. Even if you've got a working, my wife Lisa uses it often when we travel. Even though we usually have Wi-Fi and we usually have cell signals, it's so much faster for her to work on all of her internal FileMaker systems when she's got her own copy of it on her own laptop, and then just not worry about whether we're on a train or a plane or if the connection is not as fast as she'd like it to be. So there's that. So I kind of did this in the opposite order. That's the client server sync. But let's talk about the top part. We do server-to-server syncing as well. So you can sync FileMaker Server to FileMaker Server. For instance, one of our clients is in Sweden, and they have a bunch of users who are in Tokyo. So we help them set up a server in Sweden and a server in Tokyo, and we sync back and forth between the two. So that's a good example of where you might use FileMaker Server to FileMaker Server. And I've got some examples in other slides, so I won't go into this overly, but there's FileMaker, pretty much all the normal SQL relational databases you can think of. There's Salesforce. There's DynamoDB, which is my favorite thing to sync with, actually, because DynamoDB is super cool. There's Amazon Redshift, which we had a gigantic advertising client who used Redshift to track Nielsen ratings, and anything that has a custom API. So we sync with a bunch of different things. And then here's something that I only have 3 customers that I can think of that are doing this, but I'm going to demo it. is that you can sync FileMaker Pro with any of those databases. So you can sync FileMaker Pro, of course, with FileMaker Server, but did you know you can sync FileMaker Pro with MySQL, or sync FileMaker Pro with SQL Server, or sync FileMaker Pro with Salesforce. So we can make any of those things talk to each other from an offline copy running on FileMaker. So I've got a few examples of some cool things that people are doing. I've got a few server-to-server examples and a few client-to-server examples. So this is one, this is a friend of mine, Wade. He has 6 warehouses in Southern California, and he has a warehouse for racing car inventory parts. And what he found is that even though they're all in Southern California together, and even though they all have fast Wi-Fi, it wound up being much faster for him to put a FileMaker server in each of his 6 warehouses and have MirrorSync sync all of those for picking and high-speed inventory operations than having them all connect remotely to each other. One of our early Salesforce customers, they do African safari tours, and they use Salesforce for all of their prospecting and all their leads and all of their kind of like outbound sales calls. Once a client says, yes, I'd like to go on a tour, they sync that with MirrorSync to FileMaker, and they build the itinerary in FileMaker. So it lets FileMaker do the things it's really good at while using other tools for the things that they're really good at. The project that I personally have been most involved with is Chicago Public Schools. We sync FileMaker Server to DynamoDB. In case you're not familiar with DynamoDB, it's the database that runs Amazon.com. And so I think that this most recent Prime Day, they had DynamoDB was hitting something like 84 million transactions per second on Prime Day, which is just a silly number. But the point is that you're not going to overwhelm it. And so it's pretty cool that you can take a FileMaker server, which we all love FileMaker Server, but I don't think any of us would try to run tens of thousands of transactions per second against FileMaker Server, or millions of transactions, obviously. Sync that information in a FileMaker database with DynamoDB, and what they do is that on a particular day and time of the year, they say, hey, all the families that applied for all these various competitive enrollment programs at 5 o'clock on Friday can all log in at the exact same time as each other to check and see what programs you got into. And if you've ever tried something like that in FileMaker, and actually, to be fair, to most databases are not going to handle 40,000 simultaneous people logging in to see which programs their kids got into. But DynamoDB doesn't blink an eye. And so with MirrorSync, you can, again, use different databases for the things they're best at. FileMaker is really, really good for scoring the kids and putting them into the programs they're supposed to go in. DynamoDB is really, really good for running a really high-volume web application that 40,000 simultaneous people log into. One of our hosting customers, not that McDonald's company, but a different McDonald's company, they have offices in Texas and Illinois. Illinois is their main location, and so we set up a server hosting for them in Illinois. But they have a bunch of people that are also in Texas, so we set up a server hosting for them in Texas. What made this particularly interesting is that they wanted each one to work in case the other one went down. So we set up MirrorSync to sync their Illinois server with their Texas server. We use dynamic DNS on Route 53 on AWS so that if one server goes down, all the users just get one host name. They don't even need to know that something went down. They just go to the one host name, and it'll redirect them to either, if both servers are running, it directs them to whichever one is closer. If either server is down, it'll direct all the users to the server that's up. So some high availability examples that you can do there with MirrorSync stuff. Let's talk about client to server. So those are all examples of syncing one server to another server or multiple servers to each other. Let's talk about client to server. So this is, I think, not the one that I'm personally involved, but probably my favorite MirrorSync story. If anyone here remembers Youth with a Mission, they were at a previous DevCon. Andy Lacates talked about what they were doing. They have hospital ships, one hospital ship. They're expensive. They have a hospital ship that sails around Papua New Guinea, and they have doctors on board that ship that volunteer to be on that ship, and they go aboard to all these very, very remote villages on the shores of Papua New Guinea. And they carry iPads and iPhones with them, and they have FileMaker Go. And they use MirrorSync to sync all that data to like do mostly optometry and dental visits. And they sync all that data up to the server, up to the server on board their ship. And then they also do a server-to-server sync to sync lots of S words to sync that shipboard server up to another server in Sydney. And so we donated a license to them for that because it's really cool what they're doing. And I'm friends with Marty Thomason, who's the developer on that project. Our largest MirrorSync customer is IMS. They do almost all first responder medical emergency and fire emergency in the state of Ohio in the United States. So if you're in Ohio and you have a heart attack and an ambulance comes and picks you up and puts you in the back, they're going to be entering your vital statistics into a FileMaker Go application in the back of that ambulance. They're not worrying about whether or not they're losing their cell towers as they travel at high speeds, because they get it all entered as they're riding to the hospital, and as they're wheeling you out the doors of the ambulance, they're hitting the sync button, and it's syncing all that stuff. This particular sync is a one-way push. So it does a one-way sync. It takes about 6 seconds for the sync to finish, so it's very fast. And it pushes all that data onto the hospital server so that by the time a doctor is seeing you, they've already got all the preliminary information entered by the EMS people that brought you there. I mentioned Chris Rogers. He was one of our early beta testers. He has a vertical market application called Tour Pro, and they have dance competitions all over the world. So on a weekend, there's typically over 500 customers in a weekend have 500 different competitive dance things. And I've been to some of these competitive dance programs, and they're crazy and they're chaotic, but they're all, I would say, everyone that I've talked to in dance competitions uses his software, and they're all using FileMaker Pro to do all the judging and put all the routines together. And when they click sync, it syncs all the stuff up to Southern California, to Chris's servers there. And they're using that in 5 countries around the world. This last one is not nearly as exotic as some of the other ones that I've told you about, but it's interesting for a particular reason, which is that we give MirrorSync away for one device. So you can use MirrorSync totally free, for whether it's just for testing purposes or for production purposes, for free with one device. So one of my favorite stories to tell is EPB Office Products. The owner is named Cindy. I've talked to her a few times. She's just a one-person company. Well, she's not a one-person. She's the owner of the company. She's a Canadian company. She's got a staff that does inventory and shipping of office products in Canada. She travels all over the world, and whenever she travels, she takes a copy of her FileMaker database with her, and she uses MirrorSync to sync it up. Interestingly, she pays nothing for that, and that's fine with us. We want people to use it that way because we want people to like it and tell other people about it. We only charge for MirrorSync if there's more than one device. So before I move on, let me stop for a moment. Now I'm going to get into stuff about what's new, what's different in MirrorSync 7. But before I do, did I answer a fair number of any questions from the people who have not used MirrorSync before, just on some of the basics before I keep going? We're good? All right, cool. So for the people that are using MirrorSync 6 or earlier, these are the things that we've really focused on that are new in MirrorSync 7. The first one is, and I'm going to demo most of these, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these bullet points, but we now do much better working with the iOS SDK deployment thing if you're deploying on the App Store or using mobile device management to deploy your application. We now do email notifications for server-side initial sync, so that's always been a problem that people are like, my users it takes 8 minutes for them to sync, and oftentimes their laptop will go to sleep or their phone will turn off or they'll lose their network while that initial sync runs. Now we can do the initial sync on the server and send them an email when it's ready to go, so they don't need to wait for that to finish. We've greatly simplified the launcher file so that now you can open it in 2 clicks instead of 9 if you send that to them on an iOS device. So it's much simpler for users to figure out the end users to open up their file. And we also support multi-file solutions. Historically, we've only supported mobile files that are a single file, a single FMP12 file, but now we can do like separation model or like old legacy files that have a ton of different files and stuff like that. I'm going to spend a lot of my time talking about speed improvements, so I'm not going to go into the details here because each one of these has its own little demo. Some things I won't demo, so I'll talk a little bit more about them, is that there is now a sync history database, which means that every time you run a sync, we create a record in a database, a separate database that we ship, so that as the developer or the administrator for that, you can go back and look at each user sync, how long it took, whether there were any problems, whether anything went wrong, if there were records that were deleted, inserted, et cetera, like that. So you now have a very easy way to see every sync that's ever happened. We've added a REST API feature. It's always been there, but we now have documented it. So there's an admin API if you want to do something like programmatically enable auto syncing, turn that on or off, or maybe you've got a vertical market application and you want to just use an admin API to configure your solution instead of having your customers have to like walk you through that with the setup. Yeah, Johan.
So the sync history database, is that also available for the admin API, so you can
Yeah, so the question was the historical database, is there an admin API to that? That's just a FileMaker database. So you can totally customize it. You have full access credentials to it. So you can set up whatever account you want, enable the REST API and OData and read and write that, yeah. And we encourage you to customize it. There's a script there. That's kind of the one script that MirrorSync calls. We encourage you to modify that script yourself and send yourself notifications or trigger actions or something like that. And this one, this took a surprising amount of time, but we rewrote all the documentation pretty much from scratch because it was really getting old. And so there's all new documentation before. If you've read the MirrorSync documentation before and been frustrated, it's a lot better now, I promise. So I'm going to get into a few demos. I've got a few demos that are live and a few demos that are pre-recorded because I wasn't positive that our network would be working well. But for the sync history database, I'm just going to quickly jump into FileMaker and move that over to my right screen here. I've got a bunch of different monitors open. And I've got everything running for all of my demos. I have everything running on this laptop here. So this laptop is both my MirrorSync server, my FileMaker client, and my presentation box. So it's all happening here. I am going to be using FileMaker Starting Point from Richard Carlton Consulting. It's a free solution that they give away. That's pretty much what I do all my demos in because I'm too lazy to create a really nice looking solution myself to demo this. So I've taken his and modified it for use. The way that the MirrorSync history database works is you take whatever database you're going to sync with, you stick an underscore MirrorSync on the end of it like this, and that is the file that MirrorSync will look for. And then you make sure that there is admin username and password that matches an admin username and password in the database that you're using to sync. So if I look at this history database, view sync history. So I'll come back to this. I'll come back to this database at the end, but there's 0 records in here right now. I cleared them out last night as I was practicing, but I'll come back and show you that. Now what I've got is I've got an iOS SDK deployment and version update. And this is a pre-recorded demo. I didn't want to like mess with the Xcode bundling process like right here live, but I'm gonna I'm gonna talk through it and explain what's happening. There's a lot of cool things that are going on here. So what we've done is we've created this this kind of example. It's a real application called Roswell Rescue. Our office is based in Roswell, which is a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia, in the States. And Roswell Rescue, the purpose of it is so that you can go to a pet rescue kind of event. Everybody can go there, see the dogs and cats and animals and stuff that they have there. You would pick an animal, fill out all the information of the person who wants to adopt the animal and fill it all out. So that's what this is for. Let's talk about the things that make it interesting. One is that this is not FileMaker Go. This is an iOS SDK bundled application. I deployed this for testing purposes using a sync cable, but it could have been deployed using like JAMF, like mobile device management software. It could have been deployed using the Apple App Store. It could have been deployed using a side-loading beta testing program or the Apple Enterprise account. The point is that it allows you to, MirrorSync now works really well with the iOS SDK app. And the secret sauce there, we had a really hard time with this. And the reason we had such a hard time getting this to work in previous versions of MirrorSync is because with the iOS SDK app, it worked fine, but version updates did not work. There's a feature of MirrorSync that I'm about to show you where you can update the version of the SDK app. The reason it did not work is because in the iOS SDK app, you designated one file as your main file. And anytime you close that main file, the iOS SDK app would just exit. So how do you update the version if you can't close the file? And so the way we solved that problem in MirrorSync 7 is we're now distributing a launcher file. And the launcher file is a tiny little 800 kilobyte file that all it contains is a URL to download the real file from the MirrorSync server. So by making that launcher file your main file and distributing that on the App Store, when the users first download that launcher file, and it actually happened in my demo, but I was kind of doing this out of order, so I didn't really talk through it as it went. But by distributing that launcher file as the file in the App Store, you get that ability on the initial sync, it downloads the real file, and then you'll see when I get to version updates how that solves our version update problem. But I'm going to run a sync now. And this is my first sync, so it's asking me for a device identifier. It runs the sync. It's very fast. It finishes in 1 second. I'm sorry, in 3.48 seconds. It added one new record. Let me call your attention to this thing right here. Hub node MySQL / sync adoptions added one. It's not hub node FileMaker. It's hub node MySQL. So this particular example is a FileMaker. It's not FileMaker Go. I was about to say that, and it's wrong. It's an iOS SDK app bundled using the iOS SDK app tools from Claris, not talking to FileMaker Server, but talking to MySQL. So this would be, I think, a pretty cool way to deploy a vertical market application. For the 2 or 3 clients that we have that are using this, they're very, very happy with the speed. It's much, it's much faster, honestly, to sync between MySQL as the server than it is to sync with FileMaker Server as the hub. So that's sync finished. Now what I'm going to talk about is version updates. So you can see in my demo here, I'm no longer in FileMaker Go or FileMaker or sorry, an iOS device. I'm now on my computer, and I want to make some development changes. So I'm going to go to layout mode. This red delete button is too prominent and too close to my edit button. So in our fictitious example here, users are clicking the delete button accidentally too often. So we're going to fix that problem. We move it over to the right edge, and we're going to change the color here so that it's less prominent so users aren't tempted to click on it out of curiosity quite as much. And now here's the cool part. We go into Manage Database. When you set up MirrorSync, part of the process of setting up MirrorSync is there's a MirrorSync table. I don't know if it's highly visible or not, but if you go down to the pull-down menu, there's a MirrorSync table, and there's a field called Database Version. And by changing that database version to anything other than what it is right now, that tells MirrorSync that after the next successful sync, it should download a new version. So I'm going to change this 1.0 to a 1.1. I did all of that on my hosted FileMaker database. I didn't do anything to the App Store. I didn't redistribute my launcher file. I didn't do anything to the users. I just changed it on my hosted FileMaker server database. Yeah? The version, so the question was, thank you. You picked up the microphone. You reminded me to repeat the question. That's perfect. Every time you put your hand down there, I'm like, I need to repeat that question. So the question was, can the string be a number? Can it be a version? Can it be whatever? We always treat it as text. So you can have it be, you don't have to put it in quotes, but we will always cast it to text and just compare, does this text value match the previous text value? That lets you do semantic versioning in case you have multiple decimal places or you want to stick the word like beta on there at the end or something along those lines. But now I'm back to the same user. I'm running the same application I was before. I'm going to run my sync button again. It's going to run my sync. No changes. Finish very quickly as usual. But this is different. I didn't get this the last time I did it. Now it says there's a new database version available named 1.1. Would you like to replace your current offline version with this version? I'm going to hit OK. And when I do, the launcher file, remember what I was talking about before, the launcher file just closed my pet rescue application, downloads a new one from the server. The launcher file never closes, so the iOS SDK never exits. And then sorry, I talked too long and it went right past the end of my demo. The point is that it went and downloaded that new version, and then that user got the new version. So let's talk about the significance of this for a moment. The problem with distributing apps on the iOS SDK App Store has always been versioning. It's relatively easy to just take your application into Xcode, distribute it, build it into an iOS app, put it on people's devices, put it in the App Store. All of that is well documented. There's tutorials on how to do all of that. It's not hard to do it. But the problem is, how do you distribute new versions? And also, not only how do you get the new versions out there, which you can do by going through the App Store, which is, from what I've heard, a very laborious and painstaking, tedious process of asking Apple to please, please, please update this version and maybe do it now instead of in 3 months from now. But also, how do you keep the user's data? How do you not lose all the stuff that they've entered on their devices? So MirrorSync solves both of those problems for us. Their data all syncs to the server, and then it makes a new copy of that file from the server and replaces what was on there, and you're never having to resubmit that to the App Store. So you submit your launcher file as your application, and then you're in control of when the version updates happen. You're not necessarily at the mercy of the reviewers of the App Store. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about MirrorSync. I never used it, but is it a FileMaker script you launched to sync?
Yes,
Yeah,
good question.
Yeah.
That's a good question, and I should have talked about that more. So MirrorSync consists of basically two parts. There's a server web application that you install. When you download MirrorSync, you'll get a double-clickable installer that you'll run. Typically, most people will run it on their FileMaker server. You don't have to. It can be installed on its own separate computer. It can be on Windows, Mac, or Linux. But it's a web application that it's running Tomcat in the background. That's all kind of concealed. But the point is that it's just a double-clickable installer. There's nothing that gets installed on the user's computers. There's no plugin. They don't need to run the MirrorSync installer on their computer. They don't need to download anything special. It's just a script. So the majority of the work happens on that web application that you install on your server. The script that you copy and paste into your FileMaker database only knows how to get the records, update the records, delete the records when it's told to by that web application.
The reason why I ask is just to, if it's possible to run the sync in the background. Probably not then, because it's a FileMaker script.
Yes,
like
correct.
If you have another mobile app, every syncing stuff is happening in the background, like yes. When you open the app or when you're... I just wondered if that's possible.
It is not possible.
No,
FileMaker
because,
Pro, unfortunately, and including FileMaker Go and the iOS SDK applications, are single-threaded by design. So, yeah, talk to Claris. Let them know that you'd like to be able to run scripts in the background.
I already did.
Well, you did the right thing then. But before I move on that slide and get distracted, one last point before I leave this. So I think the combination of this ability to deploy your apps to the App Store, to distribute, to take care of how your data gets kept between new versions, how you can distribute new versions, but then combine all that with the fact that we work with a lot more than just FileMaker Server. Let's say you've got a client, and the client is or a potential client maybe, and they're using Salesforce. And they come to you and they say, hey, could you build me a native Salesforce application that runs on the phone that my developers could build it? If you're only thinking in FileMaker terms, your answer is probably going to be no. You're like, I don't know how to use the Force Apex API. I don't know how to do this stuff. I don't know how to write the Swift code. I don't know how to do the Objective-C stuff. Sorry, find somebody else. If you've got MirrorSync, you now have the option to say, well, sure, let me build a FileMaker Go app that talks to FileMaker Server. I'm going to set up MirrorSync. I'm going to replace the FileMaker Server tables and fields with Salesforce tables and fields. This is all a graphic interface process. There's no coding or programming required. You set up your FileMaker Go database to sync with your Salesforce Hub application. Now you distribute this application on the App Store, and now with knowing just the tools and skills that you already have as a FileMaker developer, you've built a front-end, offline application with version update capabilities that can talk to Salesforce, SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, whatever you want on the back end, or of course, FileMaker Server. So, speed improvements. 158, all right, halfway done on time. I think I'm good. Compare record contents, not just modification timestamps. Each one of these has a demo that goes with it. I'm just going to blow through these bullet points really fast, and then I'm going to show you in a detailed demo. But basically, we've gotten much smarter about not just saying, oh, well, the modification timestamp changed, so we need to write everything. Now we're like, the modification timestamp changed, so maybe we need to write certain things, and maybe we need to write everything, and maybe we need to write nothing. So that's made MirrorSync much, much faster. There's some under-the-hood stuff. How many people are familiar with, on the loop script? You know there's the new pop-up menu where like the flush behavior, always deferred. There's 3 options. I don't remember what they are. I just know that there's one called deferred loop flushing that can significantly, this is a good thing to know separately from MirrorSync. Deferred loop flushing will, if you have a complex relationship graph, we've benchmarked like 50 times faster of using deferred loop flushing. If you've, depending on the complexity of your relationship graph. If your graph is simple, you don't see much difference. But if you've got one of these horrible spider web relationship graphs, then using deferred loop flushing can make it tremendously faster. There's also downsides, and this is not a session on deferred loop flushing, so I won't go into all the downsides, but there are potential downsides that you should be aware of. You should read the articles on what it does. I have seen cases where related auto-entered calculations don't trigger correctly with the right data, so you need to know what it does and when not to use it. But when you can use it, it can really, really make your scripts a lot faster. So we've worked that into MirrorSync, that when we know in MirrorSync which fields we're writing, which ones we aren't, so we know whether it's safe to turn it on or not. So we branch actually to two separate sections of the script, one with loop flushing and one without loop flushing. That's made this script much faster. We've made all of the writes to our internal sync database multi-threaded now. So instead of writing to our internal sync database, which is not in FileMaker, it's using a database open source called HSQL. When we write all of those changes to HSQL to keep track of who's got which changes, that all happens multi-threaded now. So if you've got 8 processing cores or 20 processing cores or 32 processing cores, we'll use all of those on the server side to write all that data. And various FileMaker scripting optimizations for text concatenations and things like that. I want to call your attention to, and downloading empty clones. This one I don't have a demo on, so I should mention it. Well, I don't need to. Here's the really short version. The really short version is, instead of downloading, when you set up an initial sync for one of your users, you have an option of either giving them a full copy or an empty copy. If you give them an empty copy, we need to generate an empty clone. The way we used to generate an empty clone was we would ask FileMaker Server to do a backup and also create an empty clone. We would then throw away the backup, which took all that time, and just get that empty clone and give it to the user. There's an option added to the admin API now called clone only. So we now use the clone only option, and one of our test databases for a real live customer went from 40 minutes to 8 seconds. So tremendously faster for making clones of large databases. But the last bullet point is the one that I find particularly interesting, because this is for a real world customer. They're called Life Notes. A company's called OneSource. Actually, Maria Helgeson is here at the show. She's Belgian, and she's the developer for the solution. So I got a chance to say hi to her in person, which is really cool. I didn't think I'd ever get to see her in person. But anyway, they've got a large database. It's 33 gigabytes, 136 tables. Their initial syncs with MirrorSync 6 took 28 minutes. By not changing any scripting at all, just changing it to use MirrorSync 7, it went from 28 minutes to 6 minutes and 48 seconds. So just based on these loop flushing changes, the multi-threaded concurrency, all those things, it's made it 4 times faster. And that's not even the things at the top about 18 and 13 times faster. So I've got a quick video that shows the Life Note solution that I was just talking about for OneSource. So I'm going to let this run. I'm going to talk as it goes. So they do home health visits, and so they've got this database of medical codes that they need for insurance purposes, because we're in the United States, and you know how that is. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to replace all the contents of one field, but I'm replacing it with itself, which is a very common tech support request that I get with MirrorSync, is that customers will call me. I'm going to pause because I talk for a long time. Customers will call me, and they're like, all of my syncs were really, really fast yesterday, and today they're really, really slow. And I'm like, did you just do a replace operation? They're like, no, I'm sure I didn't. And then I'm like, well, how come 100,000 records all have the same modification timestamp? They're like, oh, okay, I guess I did. And so this is a really common thing that we have happening with MirrorSync, is that somebody does a replace operation on 100,000 or 1,000,000 records. Many times they're replacing it with the same thing that was already there. Like, for instance, set the sum total of the invoice equal to the sum of all of its line items. 99% of the invoices already have that value stored in there. So what this is demonstrating here, I just replaced the field with itself. So nothing actually changed. And now on the demo, I've got MirrorSync 7 running on the left. I've got MirrorSync 6 running on the right. These are on iPads. And I'm doing this pre-recorded because this would have been really hard to set up with 2 iPads running at the same time. MirrorSync 7 is already finished. It finished in 3.813 seconds. MirrorSync 6 is still running on the right, and let's talk about why MirrorSync 7 is so much faster. The reason it's so much faster is because MirrorSync 7 saw that however many records, it was like 10,000 records or something like that. It saw that they had all been modified, but it went and got the contents of all 10,000 records, checked it against our internal database, saw that they matched what was previously there, and skipped writing them to the other database. MirrorSync 6 was not that smart, so MirrorSync 6 says, well, they all changed. let me write them all 10,000 records from here to there. So it's churning away, and there's a pre-recorded video, so I know exactly how long it takes. It takes 70 seconds on the write. So this is 18 times faster. And this is a really common thing that happens all the time to us, is just users looping through records or replacing records and not really changing the records. So now MirrorSync 7 is smart enough. So MirrorSync 6 just finished on the write. And it looks like it wrote 2,204 records. Yeah, there it is, 2,204 records, whereas MirrorSync 7 was able to see that 2,204 records changed, but that none of them needed to actually be written because their content still matched. Next demo I've got is a very similar demo, but it's not quite the same because we did the same thing, but specifically we did it for container fields. What I've got here is I've got 204 photo records. These are all photos that I took mostly on my motorcycle trips. And I'm going to replace the image type. And this time I actually am changing it. I'm changing it from image to photo on all 204 records. So you say, okay, well now MirrorSync needs to actually write these records. Something really did change. So again, I'm going to start the sync running on both 7 on the left and 6 on the right at the exact same time. And this time it's taking a little longer than it took before. It took 7.255 seconds. And you'll see if you look closely, modified 204 records here. So it really did write 204 records, but it's still churning away with MirrorSync 6 on the right. And the reason there is because not only do we check whether the overall record changed, which it did in this case, but we also check all of the container fields. Each container field we individually say, did this one change, did this one change, did this one change? I changed all of the non-container data because I changed the image type, but I didn't actually modify any of the photos. So MirrorSync 7 skipped all the photos, and those are the things that take a long time. So in this case, MirrorSync 6 finishes in 96 seconds on the right. So we're 13 times faster with MirrorSync 7 in this case because we skipped writing all those photos. So I'm going to spare you guys 70 seconds worth, or 96 seconds worth of watching, waiting for that to finish. This I briefly mentioned, but let's see a demo of it. Server-side initial syncs with email notifications. So MirrorSync 7 and 6 both had a feature where initial syncs are always the thing that take the longest, right? You need to compare all the records in both databases. It's not just show me what's recently changed. It's show me all the records and let's compare them all. And it takes a long time. There's just no getting around that. So in MirrorSync 6, we added a feature to do all that work on the server so that we would do all the comparison. We would create a temporary copy of the database on the server for the user. Let me go ahead and let this, no, I should talk through it and then let it run. We would do a temporary copy of the database on the server. We would then do a server-to-server sync between the real database and the temporary database. When that finished, we would close the temporary database and download it to the user so that they would have an already synced database, so their first sync is really fast. Now I'm going to go ahead and let this video run. What we added in MirrorSync 7 is this last field here. So we've got a username and a password, which we need because we're going to sync as that user. So we need to know who they are because that might control which records they have access to. So, is my thing running? I thought it was. So we're going to put in a username, we're going to put in a password, and here's what's new in MirrorSync 7 is this bottoms field. It says optional email address. So we're going to enter an email address, and now we're going to start that running with MirrorSync 7 on the left and 6 on the right. I'm going to pause it briefly because I want to read this screen to you. It says, you'll receive an email at demo@360works.com. When the file is complete and ready to download, you may close this browser window. So MirrorSync 6 is doing that thing I just told you guys about. It's doing that initial server-side sync, but it's sitting there waiting the whole time. So the user still has to wait. It's running faster because it's on the server, so that's good, but the user is still sitting there having to wait for it to finish even though it's on the server. On MirrorSync 7, the user doesn't have to wait at all. They can close their iPad. They can turn it off. They can disconnect from the network. They could check back 4 hours later, and they'll have an email waiting for them that says, your file's ready to go. So that's what I've got on the left. The email just came in from the server. I'm going to click that. And when I click that link, that is my already synced initial file, and it downloads and it's ready to go. I can flip through these records to prove that it really did do that initial sync. It got them all ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and run my first initial sync. Remember, MirrorSync 6 is still trying to finish its initial sync on the right. I've already finished that initial sync on the left. I've downloaded it. I'm running my first incremental sync. that finished in no time because it had already been synced and it's an incremental sync. So the idea here basically is take that painful waiting time away from the users. They're still going to have to wait, but don't make them have to sit there with their iPad open, watching a blank screen saying, it's going, it's going, it's going. It's much better for them to wait and then just get an email saying, hey, that's all done, it's ready to go. This, by the way, was the last feature that I added to MirrorSync 7, and it's the one that the people have been the most excited about. So let's talk about, if you've got MirrorSync 6 right now, what is the process for moving to MirrorSync 7? So one thing, if you looked, I don't know if I showed any screens of this or not, but MirrorSync 7, actually, we intentionally decided not to change the name of the script. So don't be alarmed if you're installing MirrorSync 7 and the names of all the scripts say MirrorSync 6. That's intentional, and we did that to make it totally backwards compatible. So you can install MirrorSync 7 on your server and still sync just fine with all the current users that already have MirrorSync 6 out there. There is no upgrade process, no required upgrade process for them to use those at all. Once you run the MirrorSync 7 installer, you're going to be getting some of the speed benefits, but not all of them, because a lot of the speed ups on MirrorSync 7 are on the client-side script. So it'll continue to work, but then what you would do is that to get all the speed benefits, this third bullet point here, what you do is you replace the FileMaker scripts in your hosted file with the new MirrorSync 7 scripts, and then you just encourage your users, when it's convenient for them, to get the newest version. And you can use that version update feature that I showed you guys previously if you want to trigger that version yourself. And they'll continue to work with their older offline copies, but then on their next initial sync, it'll say, hey, there's a newer version, do you want to get it? That'll get them a new FileMaker file that has all the new scripts, and then they'll get all the speed benefits of MirrorSync 7. So we feel like we could not have made the upgrade process any easier, but I just wanted to caution you guys, don't send us a tech support thing saying, hey, this still says MirrorSync 6 on the scripts. We named it that way on purpose so it would still work with the old file. It is available now. We released it on July 3rd of this year. You can go to mirrorsync.com. You can also go to 360works.com/mirrorsync. They all go to the same place. As I mentioned in that use case thing up front, it is totally free for one device. That's not that's not a trial version. It doesn't expire. There's no limitations on the features. It's everything that MirrorSync does, and we want you to use it that way with one device. We want you to use it that way, and we hope you love it, and then we hope you'll recommend it to your other customers. The additional price, the additional devices beyond the first one, I've got the price there in dollars as well as the current today's exchange rate in euros. So it's €6.50 per month, and the price declines as your quantity increases. We do have special quantity bundles for 1,000 device bundles. So if you're using like that iOS SDK app thing and you're doing like a public-facing application, we know it's not affordable to pay €3.50 per month for a public-facing application. So we've come up with some bundling devices that make it pretty attractive from a price standpoint if you're doing a public-facing application. If you're doing server-to-server syncs, those are $115 per month, which is €99. And we offer hosting at 360Works. You can go to 360works.cloud to see our hosting, and you still need to buy MirrorSync, but we charge no extra to host MirrorSync. So if you have your MirrorSync license, we'll take the license and we'll do all the hosting for you on our servers. We're obviously very experienced at maintaining and supporting it, and there's no cost to that beyond the basic cost of our hosting. If you are a Claris partner, if you're a member of the Claris Partner Program, come to our booth upstairs, 360Works, and come we've got a card with a code on it, and you can use that code. It's only available to Claris partners, and it's a deeply discounted, not for resale, portfolio bundle, which is all the products that we have, including MirrorSync, as well as all of our other plugins and products, because we have a lot. We sell that at a nominal price because we're really, again, it's not for resale. It's not for your client's use. It's for your own use in your own business. We want to make it very affordable for you to be able to use any of our tools for your own benefit, and we hope that you will try it and see that we'll hope you'll try it and you'll like it. There's also a discount program available for Claris partners for your clients. So if you're considering this for a client, and if you're a Claris partner, come get with me. We'll give you a discount code so that you can make a commission on selling this to your customers. Any questions you have, support@360works.com. And last but not least, we have, I would say, maybe 20% of our customers ask us to just do everything for them. On the server-to-server side, it's probably more like 50%. So that's totally normal. If you like the tool and you don't feel like learning it or messing around with it and you just want it, just let us know and we'll just take a look at your database and we'll get you a quote to just install and set up the whole thing for you. We have tried to make the process very, very simple to do yourself. So, we're not trying to just like turn this into you need us to do it. But if you just don't want to be bothered with having to like learn how to do it, that's totally fine. And I think, so what questions do people have in the group?
I have a few.
Yeah.
If possible.
Yeah.
So you said there's a one.
We're doing good on time, by the way. Go
Okay,
ahead.
good.
Yeah.
But if there are others.
Yeah.
So one device, which means one client and a server, for instance.
Yes.
The free version. Okay.
Yes, there's nothing whatsoever that you pay for to
Okay.
install it on the server and use it with one device.
Okay. So I have a use case question. We have two projects where we build our own synchronization thing, which is a challenge, as you know.
Yes.
One is indeed with iPads and a back office solution. It's for inspections on river ships.
Inspections is a very common use case for MirrorSync.
And there we had the challenge on providing updates on the iPads as well, because we regularly update the solution.
Yes.
Is the only way by putting it into the App Store, the update process, or
No.
not necessarily?
I'm sorry, I did not mean to give that impression. That version update feature that I showed you will work with MirrorSync in any configuration.
Okay.
Even server-to-server configurations, which is interesting. You can actually update the version number and we will take the database from your main server and copy it over to your secondary server. We'll, of course, do it with laptops, iPads, iPhones, and the iOS SDK. My point there was to show it also works this way.
Okay.
I should have explained that better. It's not only for that, yes.
Yeah. So the thing you mean with server-to-server synchronization could also be used for instance, filling up a development version with new data from your live production environment, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You could use it for that purposes. There are other tools that do similar things. We have a tool called 360 Deploy. There's Auto FMS. I'm very curious to learn more about the Devon product that they have out there. But yes, MirrorSync could be used for that purpose.
Okay,
Yes.
great. And the last question I have is a situation where there are two servers in China and one in Holland. They share their data, but the biggest problem, of course, we preferred one server,
Yes.
but because of latency and whatever blocks in China for some reason sometimes, we chose differently. So that will be an ideal situation for MirrorSync, right?
Yes.
So to have all the data in 3 servers equally updated.
What you do in that case, you always designate one server as your hub.
Yeah, that's.
And then you have multiple
in this
spokes.
case,
And the spokes might be other servers, they might be client devices.
Yeah.
What you don't want to do is you don't want to have server A as the hub for server B, and then server B as the hub for server C.
Yeah.
You want to have server A be the hub for both B and C.
Yeah, that's the situation right now as
Yes.
well. So, yeah.
But that will
Okay.
work fine.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you.
Yeah?
Okay.
Any other questions?
All right. Thank you for this session.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks for coming.
All right. Currently, we are running on MirrorSync 6, and we intend upgrading to 7. But we have over 2,000 offline users.
I know.
So now, with this, once we update the script up to 7, are we going to generate over 2,000 offline apps again for the users?
Yes. But you don't have to do it all at once.
Okay.
So the question is, with 2,000 offline copies and you upgrade the version, are you going to have 2,000 new offline copies?
Yeah.
The answer is yes, you will. Well, Okay. The answer is no, you don't have to. You could leave those 2,000 users with their offline copies for as long as you want. And then you can upgrade them at whatever schedule or pace you want them to. What I will say, though, is that if you're using the built-in version feature that I showed you here, we don't currently have a way of just targeting certain users for that. So if you change that version number, all 2,000 users will be prompted on their next sync, do you want to upgrade this? And that might be disruptive. So you might consider other options. Remember that MirrorSync, when we make that separate version, there's nothing magic about what we're doing. We're basically just taking a copy of the file from FileMaker Server and downloading it to that user. The only magic that we do is kind of making it automatic for them to close the old file and open the new file. So if you have your own process for sending out new copies of your offline copies to your users, and you've got 2,000 users, maybe you say, we're going to do 200 a week over the course of 10 weeks. And maybe these certain users will never get upgraded because it's just too hard to get in touch with them. And that's fine. MirrorSync 7 will work with a mixture of MirrorSync 6 older offline clients and MirrorSync 7 newer clients. The newer clients will get all the new speed benefits. The older clients will still work just as well as they used to work.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Another question. I have noticed something with the current 6. When setting up the server-to-server configuration or the client-to-server configuration, where you specify the email for notification, if I once specified a group email, but we didn't get notification, then I had to change it back to my personal email, and I got the notification. So is it that the system is unable to send to group emails?
I don't know of any. I think the question is, why didn't the admin sync notifications go to the group email? Why would they only go to the personal email?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that, but I do know that all the emails go through a proxy server that we run. So if you're having a problem with it and you send us a support ticket, we can look at all the logs from our proxy server and we can see if there was a reason that one was bounced as undeliverable.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just put that on the support.
Yeah.
All right, that'll be all. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Stephen, how you doing?
When does the
This is like your third time watching me present this. I'm really happy that you're here, but I know that you sat through this presentation before.
I learn something every time.
Okay, great.
When does the log get written to the FileMaker file?
You were, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you came for the third time to present this. You know, I actually skipped, because I was worried about running out of time, I skipped doing the live demos that I normally do. So let me do a few of the live demos so I can show you the history. So if I go to, let's see, I should have it in recents. So here's the FM starting point database. Here's my contacts that I have in that. I am going to show you, so this, remember I mentioned there's a launcher file? This is the launcher file that I created. And all I did for the launcher file, I'll show you very quickly. You take the download URL that you would normally send to your users and you simply copy and paste it into this launcher file. And then you send the launcher file to the users and it'll automatically open. It didn't this time because you couldn't see me, but I was holding the shift key down when I opened it, so it didn't proceed with the startup script. Now I'm going to run that again, but this time I'm not going to hold the shift key down. So now it's going to do an initial server-side sync, so it needs my credentials to run the sync as me. It runs that initial sync. This is all. Now we're no longer in pre-recorded land, so anything could go wrong. Okay, so on my left, I've got the hosted file, and I know this because if I go to the file menu, save a copy as is grayed out. That's a good way to know that you're working on a hosted copy of the file. On the right, this is my offline copy. It should be identical, and I can see that I do have that, so I know that I'm working with an offline copy on this side. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to run my initial sync here. You didn't see it happen because it was very fast, but this did the initial server-side sync on the server. So this should be almost instant when I run this. So that took 5 seconds. It did add one record to an audit log thing that happens every time you open and close the file. I'm going to run a few more syncs here. There's no changes, so these syncs are all finishing in less than a second. Let me, for the people that haven't seen MirrorSync, I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to do a really, really quick demo of how this works. I'm going to create a new contact record. Notice that record exists in my offline copy, but not my hosted server copy. I'm going to click the sync button. All this does is it runs the MirrorSync script. So I do that. It added that record. It took 0.9 seconds to do that. Now I see that record is in both places. I'm going to, and I'm kind of going at a blazing speed as I demo this, but I'm going to change a field on that thing. I changed the category to hot prospect. I'm going to go down here to my offline copy, and I'm going to go change a different field here with the email address. So I'm changing the same record in both the client and the server. Notice it's important I'm changing different fields from each other. I'm going to run that sync again. No problem. Notice this time that it modified one record on the hub and modified one record on the spoke, and it took 1.071 seconds. So I've got hot prospect Jesse, hot prospect Jesse. So what it did there is it merged those changes. It saw that I changed two different fields in the records, and it merged them. Now I'm going to change the same field in both. So I'm doing www.360works.com in my hosted file. And I'm just doing 360works.com in my offline file. So now I've changed the same field in the same record to two different values. I'm going to run my sync again. Now MirrorSync's not sure what to do. So it says the same record was modified. It tried to merge it, but it couldn't because it was the same field. So it says, what do you want to do? I click Resolve here. And it gives me this color-coded user interface showing me exactly, and by the way, this user interface works the same on an iPad, an iPhone, and a laptop. And it shows me this color-coded thing saying, hey, this website field is in red because it was changed on both. I'm going to click that. It's going to show me all of the fields. And I get down to here. I can see easily from the color coding which fields are in conflict. And I can either choose the left version or the right version by picking my arrows there. I could make independent choices for different fields. I could even click the edit button and say, I really want it to be that. And now on my subsequent sync, I shouldn't have tested fate and edited that. I need to mess with that a little bit. Oh, I never clicked the finish button. That's what went wrong. Let's try this.
You also decide that, for instance, the main version, your main server, would always
We do have.
rule changes.
Yeah, the question there was, could you make it so that the server always overrides the spoke? We do have an option of hub always wins. I don't personally like that option because whatever's on the hub probably came from some other spoke.
Yeah.
So essentially it's just saying whoever syncs first is the winner. But the option is available. But you'll see now that this time I remember to click the finish button and modified that record, and it took my change there of 360Works and applied that to that sync. So that's how conflict resolution works. And then the last thing I've got is deletion. I'm going to delete the record on my offline device. This is actually the hardest part of, well, conflict resolution is the hardest part. This is the second hardest part of conflict of syncing is detecting when something, oops, I was almost there. I clicked my sync button on the server side copy, which doesn't work. It says synchronization with FileMaker client must be initiated from the client device. It doesn't make any sense to sync the server with itself. So I'm going to go to my offline copy. I'm going to click sync here. And notice it deleted one record on the hub. The deletion part is scary difficult to get right, at least to make it efficient. It's not, I don't know, I could go off in the weeds for a long time about deletion detection. But the point is that there was no magic going on here. I didn't flag it for deletion. I didn't fake delete it. I didn't like soft delete it. I just did a plain old deletion, and MirrorSync was able to compare that against the known list of records that it had before. We have a very efficient algorithm for finding those faster than just doing a brute force comparison of everything. And it detected that and it deleted it from the server. So that was my very abbreviated, rushed live demo of what MirrorSync looks like. But I wanted to come back to answer Stephen's questions. I got there. Here's the sync history. So all the syncs that I just ran, including those two conflicts, are here in the sync history. And if I look at any one of them, it'll show me what happened. It'll show me that I updated one record here, show me all the information about the spoke, the device, the number of updates, deletions, et cetera. And all of this comes through bottlenecks for this one script here called store sync history. So this is where I invite you to add your own logic. So if you said, okay, I want to email myself if a user ever deletes something from the financial activity table. So I could run the script, and then I could search for the history of how many records are deleted for each table, and I could say, it's just a big blob of JSON data. So I could find that JSON data, I could see that that record was deleted from, and I could send myself a notification. Or maybe I say, send myself an email anytime that this particular user gets an error, because I know they're going to be the one that always calls me to tell me there's a problem. I want to know about it before they call me. Whatever you want. This script will be called after each sync, and you can customize it to do whatever you want. Thank you for the question. I would have skipped an important part of my demo without that.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
What is is there any speed test to figure out if a downloaded clone and then a first sync local is faster than maybe doing it server side and then getting a large file being sent down?
Sorry, I didn't quite follow you there.
So if you have a fast clone sent to the client and then you do your initial sync client side, that's the traditional way.
Yes.
The other one is server side first, and then you
Yes.
get a larger file that you have to download.
I see what you're saying.
So I'm trying to think, is there a way to do data metrics to figure out which one actually is faster?
You can certainly just do it and test it on both. I would expect that for empty clones, where you're having to create all the records on the, so again, to just reiterate a previous point, your syncs can either be, I just want to give a copy of this file to people. In that case, I doubt you'll see much difference between a client-side and a server-side initial sync. It'd probably be marginally faster on the client because it doesn't have the overhead of creating that temporary copy on the server. Most of my customers don't just sync a full copy because most of them want to filter the records. Most of them say, I only want this user to get his records for the last 7 days if the status is active and the priority is important. Whatever. It's very easy to, I didn't cover all that in my demos, but it's very easy to modify MirrorSync to just do a perform find in whatever criteria you want. And in that case, it doesn't make sense to give them a full copy of the database, run that criteria, and delete all the 97% of the records that don't match that. Instead, you want to give them an empty copy and give them the 3% of the records that do match that. So we have far more users doing the empty clone option than the full copy. I would suspect that if it's an empty clone, if you're dealing with more than, I'm just going to throw out a random number of maybe like 5,000 records, 3,000 to 5,000 records, I think you'll almost always be faster to do it on the server side. There's no network activity. The service processor is usually faster than devices. And there's going to be less data that winds up being transferred as a single FMP12 file than a bunch of individual HTTP requests that are all requesting a bunch of individual records. Yeah, but of course, you can just run it both ways and see what winds up being the winner.
Is the FMP12 file compressed on download, or?
It is, yeah.
Okay,
The FMP12 file, you don't see the compression happen, but we automatically gzip it, and then the insert from URL is smart enough to automatically ungzip it, which is kind of cool because we don't need to install a plugin or any client-side code to get that gzip to work. And I find that 40% is a pretty typical compression ratio that we get when we use gzip. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for including the server-to-server notification in the MirrorSync 7.
I know for you guys, that reporting feature is going to be really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you also extend the notification to include maybe records that are not synced? Because we do our reconciliations at the end of the month, and that means these 2,000 users are required to sync their transactions at the end of the month. And one thing I've noticed is sometimes there's a data break between the server-to-server sync. So on the timetable, the client-to-server would have the data, but when the server-to-server sync runs, we have some data gap. And at such, I had to do some manual, write some SQLs to re-import and make the data available for reconciliation and all that thing. So can the notification also tell us the number of records not synced and why it wasn't synced, because these questions keep coming from
Yes.
stakeholders. Yeah, thank you.
The notifications do tell you for each table how many records are inserted, updated, and deleted.
Okay.
If there were any errors, like for instance, let's say the record had a 301 record error indicating that a user's modifying it, it couldn't be written, that will be included in that JSON data. Or a validation error, like for instance, a 507 missing required field, that'll also be included. It's hard to get super detailed. You can always send us a support ticket and we can look at the logs and get, the exact details, but you will get all of the information about how many records are written and a description of each error of why it wasn't written.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys. This turned out to be a really longer. I thought I had tons of time, but you guys had really good questions, so thank you very much. I'll see you guys upstairs. If you have more questions, I'll be at the booth all day.